can't read you the whole piece, but I'll start with some of it. So Obama says that they're not Muslim. Quote, in the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most beneficent, in a blessed battle whose causes of success were enabled by Allah, a group of believers from the soldiers of the caliphate, may Allah strengthen and support it, set out targeting the capital of prostitution and vice, the lead carrier of the cross in Europe, Paris. This group of believers were youth who divorced the worldly life and advanced towards their enemy, hoping to be killed for Allah's sake. Doing so in support of his religion, his prophet, blessings and peace be upon him and his allies. They did so in spite of his enemies. Thus they were truthful with Allah. I'm not making up one word of this. If you want to believe what your moronic, liberal, idiotic, perverted teachers taught you in college, do so at your own risk, you morons. Because whether you want to accept you're at war doesn't matter. Because the enemy is accepted that they're at war. They're at war and you're not, so who wins that one? The targets included the theater for exhibitions where hundreds of pagans, they write, gathered for a concert of prostitution and vice. Allah blessed our brothers and granted them what they desired. They detonated their explosive belts in the masses of the disbelievers after finishing all their ammunition. We ask Allah to accept them amongst the martyrs and to allow us to follow them. I can read more of it, but I don't know if it's worth reading to an audience in America that is brain dead, drugged, psychotic. So let me read from the beginning of chapter 3 of Government Zero. I'm going to read one paragraph. Zero strategy against ISIS. Islam woven into the fabric of America, ? In 2015, Obama held an extremism conference at which he said things that are not only delusional but frightening. If he actually believes what he said, he's insane. He knows better. Consider this statement by the commander-in-chief. Quote, here in America, Islam has been woven into the fabric of our country since its founding generations. I write, really? I had no idea. I didn't know that George Washington was secretly a Muslim who got on his knees on a prayer rug and prayed to Mecca at Valley Forge.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE, 855-400-7282. Savage.
Here in America, Islam has been woven into the fabric of our country since its founding. Generations of Muslim immigrants came here and went to work as farmers and merchants and factory workers.
You know, why is he a sympathizer to Islam? Because he's a Muslim. Do you understand that through patrilineal descent, Obama is by definition Muslim? Now, whether he converted to Christianity is a question. It doesn't really matter. And whether he's a Muslim doesn't matter, because most Muslims oppose terrorism. We know that. Then why does he bend over backwards to say that they're not Islamic, they're not Muslims, when they themselves pray to Allah, say they're doing it for Allah? And by the way, since there's bleeding heart fraud in the White House, this double agent, Thin Man, so anxious to bring in so many refugees from war-torn Syria, and you liberals, I know, love refugees, especially when there's a buck to be made on it. And I'll read the names of the groups that are making billions off the refugees that are going to come in, that are coming in. You'll throw your guts up when you hear their names. You probably belong to their churches. But where are the bleeding hearts crying out for the Christian Syrians, the Christian Iraqis who are being tossed and turned around the Middle East? Do you know that many of these Christian refugees made it to America and Obama threw them out of the country? In San Diego, they had families waiting to take them in, and this evildoer in the White House had them deported because they were Christians. And do you know that Christian refugees are afraid of going to Europe because many of the refugee camps are filled with radical Muslims who are beating up less Sharia-compliant Muslims in the refugee camps, or thrown off ships, as the African refugees are doing? Did you know that? The African Muslims are so violent that they're throwing Muslims and Christians off the refugee boats who are not Sharia enough. Do you understand what's going on? Do you have any idea to comprehend the hypocrisy and lunacy? Well, then you also have to love the Democrat debates the other night, which I refused to watch. I wouldn't waste my time. It's a sham. A Stalinist show trial is too mild a statement for what this campaign of Hillary's is. But there's this old, deranged fool, and I have to say that Bernie Sanders is classically a deranged old man, literally spitting on himself, who has a delusion that ISIS is delusional. He knows more about ISIS than even ISIS does. That idiot Bernie Sanders, that laughable moron, knows more about the Islamic State than even the members of Islamic State knows. Bernie Sanders, a delusional communist from New York, says that they're under the delusion that they're just following the Quran and the Hadith. They don't know what they're doing, but Bernie knows. He knows better. But he even went further, Bernie from Brooklyn. Bernie from Brooklyn says the root cause of all of this hatred is because of climate change. And he says when people don't have enough water and can't grow the crops, they get crazy. Now, of course, this has nothing to do with the fact that they've been killing people around them since the 7th century, long before climate change occurred, long before the Industrial Revolution, long before carbon pollution occurred. Radical Islamists have been killing everyone around them to convert them to their view of the world. But Bernie Sanders says it's all about climate change. How can anyone listening to this program ever vote for a Democrat again unless they're suicidal maniacs? I don't understand. Unless they're suicidal maniacs who put money above everything else, I don't understand. Make no mistake about what I'm going to say to you. It's 100% true. There is a campaign to delude themselves in order to make a profit. This has nothing to do with humanitarianism. Wait till I read the names of the groups that want the Syrians in. You want to hear the names of them? The U.S. Conference on Catholic Bishops called for 100,000 Syrian refugees. The Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services. Do you think that the Catholic bishops and the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services are doing it because they're so benevolent and Christian? Or do you think it's because of the money? 100,000 Syrian Muslim refugees imported into the U.S. came last week from Eleanor Asir, a senior director of refugee protection at Human Rights First. Human Rights First. These are all insane liberals. They're insane. It would be laughable if they were still restricted to the nut houses called universities, which used to be a safe haven for these insane liberals. We knew that it went on there. And as long as they were confined in the new madhouses, see, Jerry Brown's father closed down the insane asylums in California, which then was followed around the country as a very progressive move. And all of the insane people who were slightly functional went to work in universities. And it was okay for the rest of us. We knew that the new nut houses, the universities, were safe places for them. And now all of a sudden they're running the world. So now let me turn to what he's doing with the military. Now, if you say, well, why are you quoting your book at a time like this? Well, for one, it's the most prophetic book of our time. Secondly, if you go into a bookstore right now, tell me why you'd want to read about killing Reagan. Is that something that's important to you right now, you fools? That's what you have to read about, Ronald Reagan again? No, you have to read about Government Zero. No borders, no language, no culture. Why have I written the book? Why did the hand of fate move my hand to write this book over the last year? Why did the hand of fate have the book come out just at this time? So let me read you the opening to the chapter Zero Military, because it happened again over the weekend. He did something that you'd never believe could happen at a time like this. Zero Military, chapter 4. Joseph Stalin executed his generals in the 1940s out of fear they were plotting a coup against him, which they were not. As a result, the Soviet military was unable to operate effectively. Similarly, other dictators have purged the military in paranoid fits. Today we are witnessing a similar purge, carried out not with bullets, but with smears, innuendo, and spurious legal charges. But it is a purge of senior military officers nevertheless. In my last book, Stop the Coming Civil War, I told you about the hundreds of high-ranking officers dismissed from the military for failing to comply with the progressive Islamist takeover. General David Petraeus, Major General Michael Carey, Vice Admiral Timothy Giardina, General Stanley Allen McChrystal. These were some of the best men in the history of the military. They're just a few of the heroes purged from the new progressive military by this crazed Stalinist in the White House. But this was by no means the end. And take a guess what happened over the weekend. You didn't read about this? Well, here it is. Saved it for you for today. When I saw it Saturday, I said, he's doing it right in front of our eyes. He's purging the military as I speak. Headline, New York Times. Dismissed Pentagon general held wide influence behind the scenes. Now, by the way, Lieutenant General Ronald F. Lewis was one of the best men in the military. He's an African American, by the way. Obama threw him out of the military over the weekend on trumped-up charges. Do you know what this man was capable of? He had one of the highest jobs in the military. But he wasn't one of these paper-pushing, phony, fat-behind idiots that sit in the Pentagon just to cash in on their pensions and contracts. This was a fighter. He was a warrior. This was a man who was a Special Forces Airborne Ranger snake eater. This was a man, a black man who went to West Point. This was a man who was one of the best fighters in the military. He developed an interest in aviation while studying mechanical engineering. And instead of becoming a pilot, he became a pilot of Apache attack helicopters. This African-American general that Obama just threw out of the military went on to command an Army battalion in Iraq. He served 2 tours in Afghanistan, first as a brigade commander and then as the deputy commander of the 101st Airborne Division. Between his tours in Afghanistan, the man was working in the Pentagon. He knew the new defense secretary, Mr. Carter. And yet he was thrown out of the military over the weekend. He had been rewarded with a promotion to lieutenant general, becoming one of the few African Americans serving in the upper ranks of the military. And they threw him out of the military under the trumped-up charges that he had an affair under the guise of personal misconduct. There were no details about the smear campaign, but he was thrown out of the military nevertheless by Barack Hussein Obama. If this is not evidence, further evidence of Obama's madness, I'd like to know what I need to present to you. So you say, well, let's say I agree with you. Let's say Savage, this guy who I've hated all these years, turns out to be right. He tried to warn us about Islamists. I called him a racist. He tried to warn us about Obama for 7 years. I called him a racist. Now I wake up and I see the guy was right. So, Savage, what do you recommend we do? I recommend immediate hearings to dismiss Barack Hussein Obama for medical reasons. I need an outside panel of psychiatrists to adjudge his sanity or insanity. What do you do if you wake up and you have a man who is so good at faking it his whole life that he can get away with faking his sanity? What if you find out that your president is a madman? Because who but a madman would say that not only is my strategy working against ISIS when it's not working, but I'm not only going to not bring in more Muslim men of military age, I'm going to bring in more of them. If that's not insanity, tell me what it is. Well, there's only one other word that applies: treason. In either case, we need a panel of psychiatrists to be convened immediately to judge whether the president is fit to hold office. Listen to me, if he's commander-in-chief, that means he should be subject to the same structure as any military general would be subject to. And if a command general starts to show signs of either paranoia or delusional behavior or going over to the other side like Bergdahl did, you have to have a convening of officers to judge whether the man is fit for office. What makes a president above the human condition? I've been asking you for years now. Look, I could plead with you all day long today and make utterly good sense, and you know what? Nothing will come of it. The reason nothing will come of it is because we are paralyzed in the West. The West is finished. I want to tell you something. We're going to be attacked again and again, and nothing's going to change. Nothing will change because we have sick progressive Islamists running everything. They're going to destroy all of us until eventually it stops and there's a reaction. Now, let me give you some observations. Over the weekend, I waited for this show to begin since Friday's show. And one of the days I went to a local mall in a suburban white community where almost everyone's